Hey Chick Chatters! We are back with episode 4 of Love is Blind. We are still in the pods after 4 episodes. Well, coming into 4 episodes, we only have one reveal. It seems like a slow season. I don't know. I just feel like we've been in the pods for a long time. But we start back off with Uche and Aaliyah, and they're talking about the Lydia situation, and they give us the clip of Lydia and Uche meeting for the first time in the pods. So we get a little bit more to the date, and Lydia seemed excited to me to see Uche. Like way more excited than Uche seemed to see Lydia. She like jumped up and put her hands up on the wall.
She heard his name and she immediately screamed. And then she just starts like listing off all these facts about him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, your name is Uche, so I don't even know the last name, so-and-so. Mm-hmm. You own a business, you have a dog, you this, you that.
Your favorite
and he's
colors.
Like, who are you? He seems very confused. And then she says, you don't know who this is? You don't know my voice? And he's like, no. And she doesn't tell him her name, but she says, I love Kobe. And at first I thought that meant Kobe Bryant, and it took me to the rewatch to figure out it was his dog.
Me too.
I really thought she was like a huge Lakers fan or something.
But I just don't understand how he could not recognize her voice. Everyone else in that place can recognize her voice. It's a pretty distinct voice.
Yeah, and he dated her.
I kind of thought it was a lie almost. Like, you know who you're talking to.
He seemed to always want to crawl out of his skin whenever he's talking about her or like around her or something for some reason.
Except for when he's talking to Aaliyah about her, he's always like, oh, she would be a great wife. She was so kind. Like, I don't know. Everyone else he talks to, I agree. But then he talks to Aaliyah about her and he talks her up all the time.
Yeah, he does guess Lydia, and then they were laughing about it. And he said something about like, oh, maybe this is a sign, but he seemed to say it like a joke. And she's just like, oh, maybe this is a sign. We should start at 0. And she's asking him if he wants to start at 0. And he's kind of like, no. Because mind you, like they did date. So if one of them is obviously open to dating the other, that means the other one might have ended it. So he seems to have been the one that ended it. And so if he wanted to date her, she seems open to it, and he could just do that outside of the pods.
Sounds like nice and everything to start at 0, but in this situation, you really cannot. You can't do the whole meeting for the first time. You already met. You can't go meet each other's families for the first time. They already have an opinion about Lydia. They've met her. They've seen her. Her friends have seen her. Her dog has seen her. That's not what you came here for. I'm glad that Uche at least was like, that's not really true to why we're here.
Full reveal would be pointless.
All of it really would be. I mean, other than like getting married and engaged, but they could have done that if they wanted to outside of the pods and still could, but it's not Love is Blind. It's just, let's get back together.
Through a wall. But she seemed to really want to push to try again almost. She seemed pretty disappointed by that answer. When Lydia and Uche are in the pods, Lydia, for one, is like kind of seeming like she already knows this was going to happen in a way. He seemed kind of like confused, and she's just kind of like, yeah, right.
Like she had a plan. She's the one like right away, like, oh, should we start from square one?
It gets to when he says no, and then she says, well, what happens if I could become engaged to somebody else? How are you going to feel then? That's when I first kind of wondered, like, girl, did you like follow him here?
Well, and it's just so obvious at that point that she's not over it and she doesn't think that he's over it. That's something that you ask in a manipulative way, but that's something that you say to like a recent ex or someone you're about to break up with. Oh, well, I'm about to date other people. How's that going to make you feel? Like, that's how it came across. If we don't pick each other, then we're going to have to see each other date other people, and that's going to hurt. Like, if you're not over it, then it wouldn't her. And I don't think Uche was at that point, but I do think Lydia was. I think that's why she brought up the question. Obviously, Uche seemed so unfazed even. He's like, no, I don't care. My biggest theory is that Lydia did know somehow that Uche was going on the experiment and followed him somehow. I don't feel like Uche actually knew. That's
what I'm leaning towards too. I can't assume that they both knew. Like, what do you get out of that? And you could go on any show at that point. Like, what did somebody recommend at one point? Oh, go on Ultimatum. We find out from producers like later on that is basically what happened. They found out because they matched up in the pods. The producers had no idea. They took them aside and were going to pull them from the show. And they both expressed that they didn't have any interest in each other and that they weren't going to date each other in the pods. The producer said, okay, well, you're not going to see each other in the pods ever again. And we never tell people what to say, but we request that you keep it to yourselves for right now. They weren't allowed to tell people that they dated.
Right.
So that was confirmed by producers who've done recent interviews about the situation because people were asking a lot of questions about it.
Obviously, yeah. I mean, it's like, it's really kind of thrown a wrench in things. And like I said at the beginning, we don't have a whole bunch of matches right now, at least engagements. Uche's kind of telling her a little bit more about the date, like sort of as we see the clip. But he says he's not compatible with Lydia or doesn't see himself as compatible with Lydia. We kind of cut back and Aaliyah's crying, so she's taking a minute. This is really the first time though that she's just learning what happened, so
she just cries against the door for a while and she comes back in to talk to Uche. She pretty much kind of cries about Lydia more than Uche at that moment. She was more upset about her friendship with Lydia than her relationship with Uche. I thought that was a little off.
I think she was really just kind of starting to make sense of maybe this is why this person has attached themselves to me. That probably does hurt because as we've talked about, they seem to have a really, really, really close bond, maybe even like kind of bizarrely close. And I think Aaliyah was just trying to be welcoming and open to that. And now all of a sudden she knows that she's like the last person to know this big secret. It's kind of creepy if you think about it. And I can only imagine how she felt because she does seem to really care about Lydia. Obviously she loves Uche and now she hears all of this.
She was calling Lydia her kid's auntie.
Her sister, yeah.
I was like, you've known this girl for 9 days tops. I know you can make friends that fast and bond over stuff, but if you've literally never met this woman in your life, like, don't promise her auntie roles.
So now you just learn this information about her, and I don't know, it would be hard for me to just want to go back in and smooth things over.
Yeah, she needed her sister conversation. I was like, okay, whatever. So then Uche just says a bunch of nice things about Lydia too. It just kind of got weird. I couldn't tell if he was being genuine either. I feel like he was just kind of saying that for the sake of Aaliyah. I think he just wanted everything to be smoothed over pretty fast. He just wanted to move forward and get this out there and just kind of keep it stepping. He seems to be kind of grazing over details and only saying probably like half of things. You know, like who knows? It just seems a little bit incomplete when he's talking.
Well, not only does he say all these nice things about Lydia, but then he also expresses concern to Aaliyah about Milton in that moment too. So yeah, I don't know. There wasn't a lot of like reassurance of the relationship. They did get to that, I think, towards the end of this pod date. It was like the first focus was like Aaliyah being focused on Lydia, and then Uche was kind of focused on Milton and his lack of marriage readiness. Hard times can bring couples together, but I do think it's speaking of some kind of not healthy dynamic.
We switch from all of the chaos to Izzy and Stacy, and Izzy's getting ready to propose. And it's funny because Izzy walks out wearing a red, white, and blue type of thing, and JP is the first one to say, "Yeah, brother." Izzy decides to propose to Stacy, and he's very excited. I mean, they just had a very nice proposal. She's wearing this like boss babe white pantsuit.
I love it.
It was very like red carpet.
It was definitely unlike any other proposal outfit I think we've ever seen a woman wear on Love is Blind. She rocked it, and then she had her little like flashy slippers. Did you notice those? Yeah,
she had a whole fit. She looked like she was either going on like the Conan O'Brien show or a red carpet event. She looked like she was ready for a appearance of some kind. She does say yes. You know, they're both really happy about it, but she comes back to the girls' lounge and you can just see Johnny off to the complete other side, just like stewing,
spiraling.
And she's saying things like, "Well, I'm happy for you."
It was like, just don't say anything then. Don't we know this by now? Isn't she 31 or something? Like, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything. Just keep it to yourself. Not only does she sarcastically like say, "Oh, so happy for you, wish you the best," which obviously she does not wish them the best. Then she starts to go on about like his credit score and things that he's probably told her like semi in confidence, right? I know they're on a TV show, but they don't show all of that stuff. She's just going on and on at that point about how terrible of a partner that he would be. She was just trying to get married to him yesterday.
I'm sure Stacy and the other people heard it. They were all in the same room.
It seemed like nobody was listening to Johnny though. Like
No.
it didn't show.
They were looking at her ring and they were all excited and happy for her. So
yeah, so I don't know if she was just talking to a camera or like what, because if she was talking to
that one girl, that girl that's always there, that's
the one that we only see in the women's quarters but never in the pod.
We never see her dating. She doesn't have any time where she ever actually talks. The girl that's always off to the side, that's the girl that Johnny was saying all these things to.
It does show Johnny back in a confessional, and she does finally have a cry about Izzy. Both Stacy and Johnny talk about holding a lot back in the women's quarters. Johnny saying in the confessional that it's been hard to try to grieve the loss of her and Izzy because she doesn't really want to be sad in front of Stacy. And Stacy was talking about how it feels relieving to finally feel happy, because I think she didn't want to rub it in Johnny's face that she thought they were going to get engaged, which they did get engaged. Johnny tries to kind of pull off a Lydia, and she says a similar thing, like, I need to sort of dust myself off and see if things can go anywhere with Chris.
I think it was Johnny's turn to then go see if Chris was either going to propose to her or leave her. Chris does tell her he chooses himself. He says that he wants to be somebody's first choice, which I do kind of applaud him for doing that early on instead of just going with it and getting to either Mexico or whatever and then having Izzy and Johnny looking at each other the entire time they're at some couples thing. Like, we've seen this play out that way many times before, so it was really nice to see somebody standing up for themselves. And it's nice to see a guy doing it too, for one.
I agree. And I joke and say, like, they should have gone to Mexico because they should have gone to Mexico. But I think that it shows that he's really genuine in that he knew he was choosing himself in that moment, and he didn't make that go on or push it on just to like keep getting film time or go to Mexico or whichever. Like, he really could have let that play out, I think, and just said no at the altar. So I don't know, it gives like kind of points of like being a genuine human to me. He just was honest.
We go from Chris and Johnny to Aaliyah and Lydia, who are just crying on the couch together because Aaliyah comes to tell
they need their own room or something. All they do is cry together, even in this really tense moment where we would all expect to have kind of maybe a standoff, not like a violence, but no, they're just wrapped in a blanket together, sobbing.
Aaliyah's coming to Lydia and telling her that Uche told her, and then she just starts bursting into tears, just kind of just admits to everything. She says, that's why I said I've seen myself in you. And it was just really creepy for me to see this whole scene go down because Lydia starts giving her more and more details about Uche that he hasn't shared about himself. Like what his house is like, what kind of car he drives, what kind of pet he has, what his pet's name is.
The way that he breathes. That's how it started. I don't know. That gives me creepy vibes. It started off kind of okay, like almost reassuring. Aaliyah said the same thing. Like, I don't want to have to feel like I can't turn my back or that I have to look over my shoulder. And I think that was a good way of saying that, especially if you're going to be friends with somebody who's dated your partner. And they both reassured her that, like, there's nothing there. And then she's like, yeah, so the way that I found out was because we walked into the pods and I heard him breathe. Psychotic. What? Like, they both apparently agree that he has a weird way of breathing, but are you serious? No.
You can see it like hitting Aaliyah more and more as this conversation's going on, and she's getting angrier. Like, she didn't want to know any of this stuff.
I wish she would have just told her to stop. Yeah. I was saying out loud both times that I watched this, just stop. It was so uncomfortable. I don't know how Lydia didn't pick up on that with how close they are. I don't know if she cared, to be honest. I wish that Aaliyah would have told her to stop. I think she told her several times, like, I don't want to know this stuff. But, I mean, I just wanted her to get up and walk away. My heart was breaking, honestly. I felt really bad.
Oh, I was like, oh, this is just getting worse and worse for Lydia. Lydia even says, like, things like how she's met his friends.
Yeah, and that she's been to several events with him, which I think that those things are just, there's no reason to say that. I think there could be a justification with Lydia by saying saying, like, I was trying to give her more information so she knows him better. But to say things like, I've been to events with him, I met his friends, his dog pees because he gets so excited, that is just rubbing it in someone's face that I know this person better than you know them. No, that's just weird, and there's no way it wouldn't feel weird.
Well, and it just proves to me that what Uche told her to begin with, that they only dated for a couple months, is wrong. She's had all this time to meet your friends and know all these things about you. I feel like you've definitely dated longer than a couple of months.
Then Lydia kind of drops the second truth bomb here, which is that they slept together 3 months ago. 3 months ago. That is not very long ago at all.
And that's what I'm saying, that Uche is admitting some things. Like, he admits that, and I feel like he admits a lot more things. You can't just tell half-truths. If you're going to say your ex is here, you might as well just tell her the whole story. So Uche downplays the relationship, and I think Lydia upplays the relationship. I think she wants to make herself seem a little bit more prominent in Uche's life and as an ex of his. She actually has the nerve to also say that Uche wanted to go from ground zero. Then that they talked about it for a second and they decided to not do it because of the experiment.
But they didn't decide that. Lydia offered the ground one out of her mouth, and Uche said that's not the experiment out of his mouth. She miscounted that, but how is Aaliyah to know at that moment? That's what worries me for her, is there's really no way for her to know the truth. She has to just decide.
Aaliyah then meets with Uche to talk about Lydia and all the things Lydia was talking about, and they kind of start a rocky conversation. It seemed like he was annoyed with her, and he was trying to kind of flip it a little bit on her. And then she says, well, you guys hooked up 3 months ago. And that's when he kind of perked up and seemed to be more like, oh crap.
Didn't deny it.
Did not deny it.
Not even close. He just left it at that. And she said it in a way, you know, like, I'm sitting here with your ex that you 3 months ago, and I was like, ooh. I mean, that, if you're going to deny something, like, you're set up perfectly well to defend yourself, and he just took it. So that was determined to be the truth.
He wants to continue, and for some reason, with literally not much explanation from him, Aaliyah's just cool with continuing, and she's 100% in.
At that point, I think she was committed to continuing it either way, as long as Lydia, for some reason, was okay with it. That was really her intention with leaving the pod and going to talk to Lydia about it, was to make sure she didn't have a problem with it. Obviously, Aaliyah has a problem with it, as we'll see, but yeah, she let Uche kind of smooth it over again, as we've seen him do a couple of times now. I don't know. He asked her, have you ever thought about a wedding ring and what that looks like? And it's like, boom, we're moved on.
Then we go from them to Lydia meeting up with Milton, and she's talking to Milton about Uche and telling him everything that Uche was telling Aaliyah. And she also downplayed it. She did not tell him all the details that she gave to Aaliyah.
I think she downplayed it even more than Uche downplayed it to Aaliyah, which is so wild because obviously she has the details. Yeah, I mean, it's human nature, right? We don't want to say bad things about ourselves. We want to avoid, you know, feeling shame and guilt, but it's all going to come out on this TV show now anyways. So, I mean, honesty is so important at that point because the truth is out there for everyone to see.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes Netflix be sitting on this footage, so it might take a year, but it's coming out.
Milton kind of shuts down. I found it strange. I mean, obviously, I felt for Lydia because she talks a lot, and he was not giving anything in that moment. In fact, he just kept saying, I'm listening. But Lydia was like, what do you think? And he's like, I'm just listening. She's not talking anymore. She's waiting for you to talk now. So he asked for space, which I think does show some good, you know, attunement with his emotions in some way. So
she desperately cries, are you coming back?
She needed reassurance in that moment very, very bad. Like, she pretty much lost her mind when he asked for space. I think she obviously thought that he was peacing out at that moment. But she goes back to the women's quarters, and I thought that we were going to get another Aaliyah, Lydia, you know, cry session, snuggle session. They're kind of on the rocks right now. So we actually see Stacy come to her support. She gives her a good pep talk.
She needed a coach. She needed somebody like Stacy, who's meant to coach football team or something, because that was direct to the point. Yeah, she fixes her an alcoholic drink and peps her up and sends her back over to Milton.
Mm-hmm. And she gets her prepared, I think, which is great, to answer the questions that Milton will have. And I think it just brought her back into the here and now, instead of like freaking out about, is he going to show up? Like, there wasn't a question if he's going to show up or what are you going to do? It was just, what are you going to say to him when you see him in 5 minutes? And then she took so long to get like pumped up and get her drink in her and everything. Milton's just sitting there in the pod waiting. And I was anxious for her at that moment. I'm like, you better hurry up or he's going to take this the wrong way.
She was so concerned if he might come back, but she took forever to go back there. And as she's returning back there, she's like talking to herself. She's like, it's okay. He's my husband. He's my husband. He's my husband. She goes in there and she explains the situation to him more. She says, any questions you have, I'll answer. And this is where we learn that she met Uche in 2020. So when he's saying they've only dated for a few months, if this was filmed in 2022, they've at least dated a year, at least minimum, maybe even 2.
It sounds like they dated, they didn't talk for a while, and then something happened and like they dated again. I mean, this is based on more information that we've heard after just these episodes, but it sounds like they had an on and off at least once. And Milton's not convinced. I mean, he's listening, he's taking in the information, but he doesn't seem as convinced as he was yesterday. And then she makes the weirdest joke, which is, if you have any more questions or doubts about me, ask Uche.
Yeah, and she's like, what, a little fast?
That joke doesn't even make sense. It only makes sense in Lydia's world, because Lydia is over here telling Milton that she ended things with Uche. I didn't really get his humor too much until the second batch of episodes, which he has, I think, a really good sense of humor. But I thought it was funny that he laughed as much as you could at that joke. He called her out too, because you have to.
Yeah, they moved on, and so will we. So yeah, after that we see Izzy and Stacy's reveal. It went pretty well.
I loved it.
She was wearing this really nice dress. It looked really nice on her. And it was prime Chris Daughtry and Leanne Rimes meeting each other for the first time.
And I thought it was really sweet. I think it was when he got on his knee. She said for a minute that she was like kind of freaking out. And I thought it was sweet that he kind of reassured her and he tells her to take it all in. Like, he gives her a minute just to be. And I don't know, as someone who's anxious and always rushing myself, my heart like fluttered when he said that.
But the funniest part to me was when they were hugging each other and putting his head in her chest. It became a thing too. I've noticed this a few times now. When they hug, it seems like his head goes into like her chest. So
yeah, he goes like dives in. I think they both like it. It's their thing. Stacy didn't shave her legs that day, so like they sit down on that little bench and I think they're kissing or something, and he starts to try to get a little handsy, and then she like pulls away and she's like, I didn't shave my legs. So I thought that was funny. Like, someone seems as put together as Stacy that she didn't shave her legs that day. I was like, oh, okay, we're all humans, I guess. We have Milton and Lydia left. They're in their proposal outfits, like their engagement outfits, because I think this really is like kind of the end. It's, you have to determine whether you're going to do this or not. Milton, I think, is still in analysis mode, but he doesn't have the door closed. I think he's really trying to make up his mind for sure in this moment. And it's funny to me because one of the first things he asks is, like, do I have to ask you permission to go hang out with my friends? Like Lydia said, like, you have to tell me you're going to your friends, but like, I'm not your mother. So yeah, that's one of the things that he had to verify before he asked someone to spend the rest of his life with him. And then he also wanted to double check that the age was still okay. They talk it over, and then all of a sudden he's like, okay, I'm on my knee. And she like jumps up and she's like, okay, I'm standing up. I just thought it was so cute. Like, it was such a nerdy moment, kind of. They're like telling each other what they're doing, and so they can act appropriately. So yeah, then Milton goes into his little proposal, which was like pretty brief but sweet. Lydia says yes basically right away, and he was like, okay, so that's over, it's that easy.
Yeah.
So they're engaged. And then we have the final scene of this episode, which is Uche in his engagement proposal outfit walking into the pod. So he sits down and he like says, hello, Aaliyah, and there's nothing. And then all of a sudden this man's voice comes over the speaker and says, Aaliyah has chosen to no longer participate in the experiment and that she's gone.
And Uche's just kind of sitting there looking like he's reeling for a second. We don't really get much of an explanation of why or when she left or what really happened.
Yeah, nothing. And then boom.
That's it.
So 3 proposals. That's it. I mean, that's a record low, right? We usually have at least 4 or 5.
A record low.
A record low. There's only 10 episodes set to launch in this whole season. And last season and the season before, there were 15 before the reunion and after the altar.
Yeah.
So they actually brought it all the way back to 10, which is season 1 had 10 episodes. Pretty uncommon, I feel like, for shows, especially shows as popular as Love is Blind, to cut back on the amount of episodes that they do. So to me, I think that speaks to the lack of content that we're about to have.
That's the end of episode 4.
Yes.
And we'll see you next time, Chick Chatters.
We'll see you then. Bye-bye.